Alright, so it's been about a week since my buddy Brandon has been here. Brandon and I go back to kind of our late college days. We've had lots of adventures together over the years, and he was sitting around in Seattle, didn't really have much to do, so decided to come down and have one more with me. So his plan was originally to sail to Tahiti with me, and then kind of make up his mind on that trip whether he wants to sail north to Hawaii or not. But first things first, he's a climber. I needed to end the main halyard, and so I sent him up the mast to go ahead and take care of that. I had a climbing harness with me, and we went ahead and rigged up some prusiks and the ascender, and he started climbing up there, and then I cranked him about the other half of the way up. But everything was successful. We ended the halyard. It being a 2-to-1 purchase, you do need to climb up to the top of the mast to get to where it's tied off up there and it's terminated in order to replace it. So halyard looks pretty good, and I think we're going to be good with that. He went ahead and inspected my rigging for me a bit, took some video for me as well, so I could kind of see what's going on up there. And yeah, the same time as Brandon was getting here, my new, to me, recycled dinghy had sprung a leak, and fortunately Lionel had agreed to come and swap it out with me, actually, for the dinghy that he's been using for the last few years. So he knew it was in good shape, and so swapped out from our 10-foot 1-inch dinghy to a 10-foot 6-inch dinghy, which barely fits in on the davits, but it's a nice skiff. It's going to work for us. And it was a hot day. Brandon had just been up the mast for over an hour, and decided it was good to go cool down, so we needed to test out the dinghy anyway. So we took off and we motored down to a reef pass just south of Utaroa. Really awesome being able to have the range on this dinghy, having a bigger skiff that you can actually take off and go for a mile or two or even further to go and find cool spots to go, go snorkeling, go hiking, get to shore, do whatever you need to do. Skiff's pretty hammered, but it held up really nice. It was great. And so we got in the water. Visibility was just kind of moderate, but it was just beautiful, and the water was almost too warm, but just lovely. Cruising through, it was a nice fishy spot. We went ahead and swam out the reef until we got out past the surf break. Things started getting a little murkier out there, but ended up finding a nice blacktip reef shark just as he was swimming away. But fortunately, he came around and gave us another pass, so I got some really crappy, murky video of him. But it was a nice little snag there, and yeah, I swam for an hour or so, then hopped back in the skiff, cruised on back into town. Next few days, Brandon and I just took care of lots of little projects here on Albinoni. We got provisioned up. Alright, there's the grocery store. There's our dinghy. There's most of our take for the next week. And then Brandon's got the rest in his Bora 80 or 450 pack with the convenient baguette holder in the back. So Dream Yachts took care of the last few projects that they said they were going to do before I took possession of the boat. The biggest one was to reinstall the holding tanks. Now, holding tanks aren't actually required here in French Polynesia, so first thing that they do when they get these boats is take the holding tanks out. It limits the plumbing, means the boats don't stink, everything's nice and simple maintenance-wise. But when I go up to Hawaii, I'm going to need to have holding tanks in the boat. Unfortunately, they kept around those tanks for the last 11 years, and they're nice, fresh, new tanks that they went ahead and threw back in the boat. The boys thought it was just going to take a morning, but it ended up being a lot bigger project than they had thought. The wind was going to be out of the northeast on Thursday, and we really wanted to leave on Thursday to take advantage of that northeast wind, because Huahine is 24 miles to the east of us here, and the wind generally has been out of the due east most of the time we're here. And so Thursday was our day to have a decent angle and maybe to be able to sail out there. But the guys were still messing with the holding tanks in the morning. They didn't finish up until almost noon, and it's going to take us, I wanted 5 hours to get there. The sun's been going down about 5:30 or 6, so it was really pushing it close. But once they got done with the holding tanks, we went ahead and just quickly sealed everything up, got the boat ready to go. We had them pull it off the harbor for us and motor it on out away from all the other cats, and then they passed it off, took off the boat, and we took off for Huahine, right into the middle of a big old squall where we got hit by some really heavy wind and rain, and ate that for a little bit. And then for the rest of our trip over to Huahine, we're just kind of out there dodging squalls. We got some sailing in for a while, and then we ended up having to motor sail most of the way because the wind actually ended up being
mostly out of the east, but fortunately we got in. Went through the reef pass just south of Fare about an hour before dark, and were able to go in, drop the hook, and ended up being a nice little passage over there. Good test of the motors at least to make sure that they're working okay, and they got shaken down. And we went through the sails a little bit and got a good feel for how things were feeling out in the open ocean. So the plan was to spend 2 nights on Huahine and then take off on the afternoon of the second full day that we were there and do a overnight passage to Moorea. It's about 90 miles, a little too far to do during the day, and if we went overnight, it would just give us a nice, kind of easy, stress-free, not having to worry about getting in before daylight trip across there. But unfortunately, the first morning when we woke up, we discovered that the inverter wasn't working. We needed that inverter to charge all of our devices, our phones, our computers, but also, some of those devices are our GPS units and our satellite communications device, things that we don't actually have a 12 volt setup for on the boat, unfortunately, right now. So the 220 volt system is something that I was going to rip out when we got up to Hawaii anyway, but Brandon and I that first morning in Huahine just went ahead and started exploring the 220 volt system, started mapping everything out and trying to figure out what was going on, because the inverter circuit just kept tripping the breaker every time that we turned it on. Turns out we found 2 different spots where water was actually getting into junction boxes and causing wires to short out in there and trip the breaker. So that was about a half-day fix, and we were able to get those areas cleaned and dried out, and we got the inverter working and most of the outlets working again. A couple of the outlets still aren't working, but like I said, I'm going to rip all those out. I'm not really worried about it too much. So we spent the rest of the day, knocked out a couple more projects, did some swimming, played some music, and then kind of joked about figuring out what was going to be broken the next morning when we woke up. And well, unfortunately, the next morning it was the refrigerator. So we woke up and our fridge was getting warm, and the day before, Brandon had mentioned to me that he heard gas leaking from the refrigerant line when we were trying to trace where water was coming in and getting into these junction boxes. And I told him, yeah, I definitely hear that sound, but it can't be refrigerant, because if it's refrigerant, then our fridge wouldn't be working, and it was still working at that time. Turns out, when the guys were installing the holding tanks, they were having to run some really big sanitation lines past all the wiring down behind the nav desk and also right by the fridge, right along the edge of that refrigerant line. I think what happened is it just pulled down on the line, and it caused a pinhole leak to open up right where the line comes out of the fridge and through a bulkhead. So there wasn't much we can do about the fridge. We didn't have any refrigerant. I didn't have anything to solder up copper line with. So all we could really do was go to the store and pick up some ice and try to make sure that our groceries didn't spoil on us. It was super rainy. The weather the entire time we were in Huahine was just crap. We had squalls running through all the time. So we just sat around. We did some more boat projects, but then in the afternoon, actually, things had picked up, and it was starting to get a little bit sunny, so we decided to go into town and rent some bicycles. So when I was on Huahine 12 years ago with my brothers, we went and walked to the north end of the island and checked out a cool marae site there. And so Brandon and I, of course, we were going to go check that out. And this time we were doing it in style on our fixed gear granny bikes with some seats that were adjusted to some very unfortunate angles. But, it's better than walking. And we cruised around and got to that hiking trail. With how much rain there was, I really expected it to just be completely muddy and almost impassable. But it turned out it was pretty nice. It was pretty dry up underneath all the trees. Just a lovely trail to get up there. The 3 different marae sites up there. One that was kind of taken over by this awesome big old banyan tree, and then of course the big one that overlooks the windward side of the island. We got some really spectacular views from up there. And then we did the hike for a while, and then we came back down, got back on our bikes, and continued on around the island until we got to Fai'ie and found the famous blue-eyed eels of Huahine. They live in a little creek running right through the middle of the town there. they've got some little dams that create pools for them, so they kind of always are in the same spot, which is great because these guys really cool. They look like pretty good sized moray eels, but with pectoral fins, and of course these pale blue eyes. And then we could have kept on going around the road, but there, it was starting to go up over the saddle of the island, and being on fixed gear bikes, we decided that wasn't a good idea. So we went ahead and turned around and took a really good detour on the way back and rode out through a motu where the airport is, and down a dirt road that went through a coconut plantation right along the ocean, and was definitely a really nice call. We knew we'd be able to get the fridge repaired in Tahiti if we made it to Tahiti, but we really didn't feel like sailing on to Moorea in very questionable weather with all the thunderstorms and squalls coming through. And we knew that Raiatea, the Dream Yachts, would come back and fix the refrigerator for us. So it just made sense. We instead of going on to Moorea, we went ahead and retraced our steps back to the Dream Yacht base in Raiatea. So this morning we woke up and there was thunder rolling over the mountains behind us and just squalls running through. But right after one squall passed, we pulled up the anchor and then followed it out the reef pass and left Huahine in our wake. Had to motor for a good hour to get out until the wind filled up behind us, and we rolled out the Jenniker and ended up having a nice Jenniker only sail downwind. And then of course squalls would come through. We'd have to roll in the Jenniker, roll out the Genoa, and then the wind would get light. We'd roll the Jenniker back out. And we did that a few times until once we were approaching Raiatea, the wind really filled in, and we had a pretty good boisterous sail, just Genoa only, on up into the reef pass, and then around up by Utaroa. We'd arranged to pick up a mooring right off the Dream Yachts base because they didn't have room for us at the dock anymore. But by the time we got up there, the wind was blowing 35 knots and coming right over the reef with no protection. That mooring, it was just rocking and rolling, and we decided pretty quickly that it just wasn't a good idea to try to pick up that mooring. I wouldn't have been comfortable spending the night out there. So we went ahead and bailed on that and motored up to Taha'a and picked up a Dream Yachts mooring up in Apu Bay. So we'll take off in the morning. Hopefully it'll be less windy then. We can go back into Utaroa and get the refrigerator tech out here on the boat and check out things. Really like to get the refrigeration running. We do have the inverter working now. Our list of projects other than the refrigerator is actually doing pretty well. But unfortunately the wind, it just looks like it's going to be the east or the southeast for the next 10 days on the forecast. And that basically means no sailing to Moorea or Tahiti. So if I want to get back to Hawaii anytime soon, it looks like I'm probably going to end up having to sail from Raiatea. So we'll see. Once we get the fridge figured out, while that's going on, we have some other paperwork issues still that are going to need to be taken care of. But while that's all happening, hopefully we'll just do some more sailing around Raiatea and Taha'a and get some more shaking down. And maybe we'll take off to Hawaii from Raiatea, or maybe the weather forecast will change over the next week and we'll be able to get to Tahiti like we originally planned. But who knows what the future holds, but I'll have a video for that one next time.